And Shams Charania, who's all over that. So Shams, as we sit here tonight, what does the trade market look like for Ja Morant?
Matt, this is the beginning of a potential exit for Ja Morant in Memphis, because for the first time since drafting him number 2 overall in 2019, sources tell me the Grizzlies are open and listening to offers on Ja Morant ahead of the February 5th NBA trade deadline. I'm told multiple teams are pursuing Morant in these trade talks, and according to rival executives, the Grizzlies are prioritizing draft picks, young players in any deal. See, and remember, Ja Morant is under team control and contract through 2028. So that's significant team control for any potential suitor that is looking to acquire him. And so today, NBA teams got word that a tantalizing player like Ja Morant, despite the off-court issues and the injuries, is potentially when multiple teams are going to be involved here.
Hey, I already saw the Atlanta Hawks part ways with Trae Young. So one of those times where these teams that have drafted these players have decided to part ways, and Ja Morant could be next. We know Shams will be all over it. Shams, thank you.
Breaking news out of the NBA, where the Grizzlies are entertaining trade offers for Ja Morant. That's according to ESPN. After this season, the All-NBA guard will have 2 years remaining on his deal before becoming a free agent the 28 offseason. Grizzlies currently sit in 10th place in the West, have won just one playoff series during Morant's 7 seasons in Memphis. I'm Tommy Tran with Sam Quinn joining us here for the breaking news. So what's your reaction and thought process of what we're learning today, Sam?
Yeah, if anything, I think they're a little bit late on this, right? We were having these conversations 2 months ago when they got off to that slow start. They missed Washington as a potential trade destination. The Hawks got there first, traded Trae Young there earlier in the week. Ja Morant has been declining for the last couple of years. He doesn't get to the rim quite as much as he used to, doesn't get to the foul line quite as much as he used to. He has a bloated max contract, 2 years left. Trae Young only has the one after this year. Never been a great defender, all sorts of off-court issues. He's just a very risky trade candidate. It does seem like there might be a few interested parties, because if you could just hone that talent, if you could just get him on the right track, maybe figure out physically what's wrong, get him back into the right shape, get him back up to where he's been in the past, you have a guard who gets to the rim at will, and that's just so valuable, even in this NBA that's moving away from small guards. So it does seem like there's a slightly bigger market for Ja Morant than there was Trae Young, but that value has gone down over the last couple months as he hasn't improved. So the Grizzlies right now are in the lottery. I don't know that they can expect a huge return here, but I think it's the right move. I think they needed to move in another direction. They just haven't been going anywhere this season.
Yeah, you put a lot of qualifiers out there for a guy with those 2 remaining years after this year, sitting at 42 and change and $44 million and change, respectively. You mentioned the trade value and how much it's dipped relatively in the last 2 months. So just give me a sense of the timeline of where this was when we were having this conversation off camera and behind the scenes 2 months ago, and where we're sitting at today.
Yeah, I think the longer this has gone on, the more injuries that have racked up, the longer sample we've had where he's not quite getting to the rim at the same level. I think that's probably lowered the trade value, right? Where the upside to downside ratio in November was a little bit different than it is now, where a team like, say, Minnesota might have looked at this in November and said, well, you know what? We feel like Oklahoma City is so good that we have to take a risk like this in order to catch up with them. But as Ja hasn't quite gotten better over those last couple of months, as Oklahoma City has slipped a little bit, a team like Minnesota might sit here and say, you know what? Let's roll with what we have. We're playing well. I don't think we have to really rock the boat in order to take a shot at them. You know, I think the value now is probably slightly lower than it was a couple of months ago. This is going to vary very much from team to team, right? Everybody's going to look at the chances of getting him back on track differently. Everybody's going to have a different salary structure. I do think there's a little bit more appeal in Ja Morant at his best than Trae Young at his best, just given he has that very high value ability to get to the rim, whereas, you know, with Trae Young, it was a lot of pretty inefficient shots. So I do think there will be a little bit more interest there, but I do think the value is far lower than it's ever been. It's lower than Memphis certainly expected when they were putting out feelers in November.
That being said, what are some potential landing spots you think?
I think 4 teams come to mind Minnesota, obviously, we just covered, was one of the teams that was interested a couple of months ago. I think the Timberwolves are playing well enough now that they don't have to act desperately. What I will say, the complicating factor for them is they'd have to include one of their big men just to make the money work. Those big men, aside from Anthony Davis, are their identity, so I don't know how eager they're going to be to do that. Sacramento, another one, they've been interested. They organizationally just so lack an identity, a direction, that they might look at Ja Morant and say, hey, you know what? We get him in the building. We can just see if we can get him to play like an all-star again. Maybe that can propel us somewhere. It can get us back maybe into the play-in mix, and we can start to build around him. They weren't interested in Trae Young. There was reporting on that. So maybe they've decided that they want to stay in the lottery and rebuild through younger players. Toronto is one of these teams that just needs a talent boost, right? They don't have, I guess aside from Scotty Barnes, like that clear superstar, all-star caliber player, and they're already paying the luxury tax, so they're paying the budget for a contending team when nobody quite believes that they're ready to contend. They have a lot of mid-sized salaries that they could trade. They have their draft picks if that's what it takes. So that might be a team that might just look at this and say, hey, we're kind of in the middle here. We don't really have that much upside. Why don't we take the swing? And then the last team, the team that has to get mentioned in any bad contract conversation, is the Milwaukee Bucks, because they're desperate. When you're desperate, you do things that might not be quite rational. I don't know that Ja Morant is really a fit for them. You always need shooting around Giannis Antetokounmpo. Their offense has not been the issue. They're second in the NBA in effective field goal percentage. They can't rebound, they can't defend, they turn the ball over too much. Those are the problems. I don't know that Ja Morant helps, but if you're trying to convince Giannis Antetokounmpo that you can compete long term, getting a younger all-star is probably a way to do that. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Bucks sniffed around this a little bit. I don't know the market is that robust, but with 4 possible teams that make some measure of sense, I think they'll be able to find a deal.
Okay, we are sitting inside of 1 month to the trade deadline in the association, and Sam Quinn joining us here with the breaking news that the Grizzlies are reportedly open to entertaining offers for their superstar in Ja Morant. If you take a look at tonight's notable games, I'll just leave you with this. Ja Morant, and where he ranks in franchise history: first in points per game, second in assists per game, first in playoff points per game, first in playoff assists per game.
Breaking news from the NBA, the Atlanta Hawks have traded Trae Young to the Washington Wizards for CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert. That's according to multiple reports. A 4-time All-Star, Young has been the face of the Hawks since he was drafted in 2018. He led Atlanta to 3 postseason appearances, including a run to the Eastern Conference Finals in 2021. But now, Atlanta is moving in another direction, and Young gets a chance at a fresh start in D.C. For more, I'm joined by CBS Sports NBA analyst John Gonzalez. John, this trade has been kind of percolating for a while now, but what's your general reaction?
Yeah, it has been percolating for a while, right? And at some point, the Atlanta Hawks looked around and went, it's been fun, Trae Young, but we're going to have to move on from you. And we really got an indication of that, Madeline, this offseason when they had an opportunity to extend Trae Young. He definitely wanted a contract extension. And the new front office, led by Ansi Saleh, who's a really smart guy, they put together a group and they went, we'd rather not pay you. And that's really when the writing was on the wall that it was time for him to move on. This has been Jalen Johnson's team for a while. Casual NBA fans are starting to get clued into him. He's going to be an all-star this year. He's playing at an all-NBA